What if you died, met Jesus, and were sent back with a message that could change everything? Sister Mary Catherine never expected that at 60 years old, she would cross over to the other side and return with a vision so powerful that it would shake her to the core. A devoted Catholic nun from Chicago, she spent her life in service, helping the poor, praying for the lost, and living by faith. But when she suffered a sudden cardiac arrest, her soul left her body, and what she saw on the other side changed everything she thought she knew. Jesus showed her glimpses of America's future in 2025, both the hope and the dangers ahead. What he revealed about the country's leaders, its people, and its destiny will leave you speechless. This is her near-death experience, and the message she returned with will make you rethink everything. Sister Mary Catherine had lived a life of discipline and devotion. She rose before dawn each day to pray, spent hours serving her community, and found peace in the quiet halls of her convent. But on a cold morning in December, everything changed. She had just finished a simple breakfast and was walking back to her room when she felt an unusual pressure in her chest. It wasn't pain, but a deep, unsettling heaviness. At first, she dismissed it. She had always been strong, rarely sick, and certainly not one to complain. But within moments, her vision blurred, her legs weakened, and she collapsed onto the floor. As the other sisters rushed to her side, panic filled the convent. They prayed as they called for an ambulance, but Sister Mary Catherine could barely hear them. The world around her was fading, the voices becoming distant echoes. She was slipping away, and she knew it. Strangely, she felt no fear. Instead, a deep, almost divine sense of calm washed over her. She whispered one final prayer, surrendering herself to God's will, and then everything went black. She was clinically dead. The doctors would later say that her heart had stopped for several minutes. Medically, she shouldn't have survived. But what happened in those minutes was something no science could explain. She had left her body, crossed into another realm, and stood before Jesus himself. The moment Sister Mary Catherine's eyes closed in the physical world, she opened them to a place beyond anything she had ever imagined. At first, she felt as if she was floating above her own body. She could see the sisters kneeling beside her, crying and praying. She saw the paramedics rushing in, shouting orders, placing defibrillator pads on her chest. But none of it mattered now. She wasn't in pain. She wasn't struggling. She was simply watching. And then, just as suddenly as she had left, she was pulled into something entirely new. A tunnel of light appeared before her, but it wasn't just light. It was warmth, love, and peace all at once. She felt as though she was being drawn into it, not against her will, but as if she was returning home. The deeper she went, the more she felt an overwhelming sense of belonging. There were no worries, no regrets, only an indescribable serenity. She could hear music, not like any sound on earth, but something purer, something divine. It was as if the very air around her was singing. Then she sensed them, figures moving toward her. They were not strangers. They were family members who had passed before her, old friends from the church, and even people she didn't recognize but somehow felt connected to. They radiated love, welcoming her without words. She wanted to stay, to embrace them, to remain in this place forever. But then she saw something, or rather, someone, that made everything else fade away. A light far brighter than the rest, a presence so powerful that it stopped her in her tracks. She knew instantly who it was. Jesus. Jesus stood before her, his presence more real than anything she had ever known. He wasn't just light, though he radiated it. He wasn't just warmth, though his very presence filled her with peace. He was everything: love, truth, authority, and gentleness all at once. He looked at her with eyes that saw every part of her soul, every joy, every sorrow, every moment of doubt, and every act of faith. There was no hiding, no pretending, and yet there was no judgment. Only love. She wanted to fall to her knees, but she didn't need to. He already knew what was in her heart. She had spent her entire life serving him, praying to him. And now, here he was, standing right in front of her. Before she could even ask where she was or what was happening, he spoke, not with words, but directly to her soul. "You have been faithful," he told her, "but there is more for you to do." She didn't understand. She thought this was the end, that she had completed her journey. But Jesus had other plans. He reached out his hand, and the moment he did, everything around her changed. The peaceful light faded, and suddenly, she was seeing something else. Visions of Earth, of the world she had left behind. But it wasn't the world as she knew it. It was the world as it would be. America in 2025. And what she saw left her breathless. Jesus showed her glimpses of the future, and at first, it was overwhelming. She saw people crying out for guidance, searching for meaning in a world that had grown chaotic. There was uncertainty in the air, not just in America, but across the globe. But amid the confusion, she also saw something beautiful. People turning back to faith, rediscovering hope, and coming together in ways they never had before. There were challenges, of course. She saw a nation still healing from division, a country at a crossroads, struggling to choose between fear and unity. But she also saw leaders working to restore trust, communities rebuilding their bonds, and families finding strength in one another. Churches that had once been half empty were filling again. People were praying, not out of desperation, but out of faith. There was a shift happening, a renewal of something deeper. Jesus made it clear, America was being given a choice. The future wasn't set in stone. It would depend on the actions of its people, on their willingness to embrace love, forgiveness, and faith over anger and fear. The vision faded, and Sister Mary Catherine felt herself being pulled back. She didn't want to leave. She wanted to stay in his presence. But then Jesus said something that changed everything. "Go back. Tell them what you have seen." As Sister Mary Catherine woke up in her hospital bed, gasping for air, she realized she had been given a mission. What Jesus had shown her about America wasn't just for her, it was for everyone. The country was standing on the edge of something new. There was division, yes, but there was also potential. She saw that the American president was striving to bring people together, working towards solutions, even in the face of difficulty. People had to choose whether they would unite or remain divided. She knew she had to share the message, to remind people that faith and love were stronger than fear. Because the future wasn't just a prophecy, it was a choice, and that choice was in their hands. Sister Mary Catherine had always believed that leadership was not just about power, it was about responsibility. In her vision, Jesus showed her the American president, standing at the center of a divided nation, facing a task greater than any leader before. The country had seen difficult years, and though many were hopeful, others were still filled with doubt. She saw that the leader was trying to bring people together, striving for balance between different viewpoints, and working towards economic stability and unity. Yet, despite the efforts, not everyone was willing to listen. Some clung to fear and anger, refusing to accept change or reconciliation. Jesus made it clear to her that leadership alone could not heal a nation. It was up to the people, each individual, to choose whether they would work together or remain divided. The leader could only guide them. But the true power lay in the hands of the citizens. She saw a vision of people from different backgrounds sitting at the same table, discussing ideas, listening to one another, and finding solutions together. This, she understood, was what America needed, not just a strong leader, but a nation willing to heal itself. The future was not determined by one person, but by the choices of millions. One of the most powerful parts of Sister Mary Catherine's vision was seeing how divided people had become, not just politically, but in their hearts. Families had stopped talking over differences in opinions. Friends had turned away from each other over disagreements. Communities had built invisible walls, separating themselves based on ideology, race, or belief. Jesus showed her how this division was not created by any government, but by individuals choosing conflict over compassion. The wounds of the past could not be healed with anger, but with love and understanding. She saw people who had once been at odds coming together, sharing meals, and helping each other in times of need. She saw neighbors who had barely spoken before joining hands to rebuild after disasters. It was in these moments of kindness and service that true change began. Jesus told her that if people continued to choose anger over love, the division would grow and America would suffer. But if they embraced compassion, understanding, and unity, the country would thrive again. The choice was theirs to make, and it had to be made soon. Jesus then showed her another vision, one that deeply troubled her. It was of people consumed by materialism, chasing wealth and possessions while neglecting their families, their faith, and their communities. She saw families sitting in the same room but not speaking to each other, their faces buried in screens. She saw people working endlessly for money but feeling empty inside. There was a sense of loneliness, even in the busiest cities. It was as if the world had become disconnected, not just from each other, but from God. Jesus spoke to her in that moment, his voice full of sorrow. He told her that the world had been given everything it needed: love, purpose, connection. But people had chosen to seek happiness in things that could never truly satisfy. The more they chased after material success, the further they drifted from what really mattered. But all was not lost. She saw people beginning to realize that true fulfillment came not from wealth, but from relationships, faith, and service to others. She saw families putting down their phones and having real conversations. She saw communities prioritizing generosity over greed. There was still hope, but people had to wake up and make the change before it was too late. One of the most beautiful parts of Sister Mary Catherine's vision was the renewal of faith across the nation. She saw people returning to prayer, not because they were desperate, but because they had rediscovered their love for God. Churches that had once been empty were now filled with families, young and old, seeking spiritual guidance and connection. Faith was no longer something people kept private. It was something they lived, something they shared with others, something that gave them strength in difficult times. She saw people of different beliefs coming together, not to argue, but to understand one another. There was a newfound respect for different faiths, a willingness to find common ground. Instead of focusing on their differences, people were realizing that they all sought the same thing: peace, love, and purpose. Jesus told her that this spiritual revival was essential for America's healing. Without faith, without a moral foundation, the nation would struggle. But with faith, it would find its way forward. She felt an overwhelming sense of hope, knowing that many were already turning back to God. Jesus then showed her the strength of human connection, the power that came when people set aside their differences and worked together for the greater good. She saw communities rebuilding after hardships, not waiting for help from governments or officials, but taking action themselves. People were helping the homeless, feeding the hungry, and caring for the sick, not because they were told to, but because their hearts led them to do so. It was in these simple acts of kindness that true change was happening. She saw a small church in a struggling town opening its doors to the needy, providing food and shelter. She saw young people volunteering, visiting the elderly, and making sure no one was forgotten. She saw businesses choosing ethics over profits, giving back to their communities instead of only taking from them. Jesus told her that service was the key to a nation's strength. It wasn't about policies or speeches. It was about people choosing to care for one another. Sister Mary Catherine felt tears in her eyes as she realized how much potential America had. There was so much goodness, so much generosity, and so much love waiting to be shared. The only thing that stood in the way was fear and selfishness. If people could overcome those, the country would not only recover, it would thrive. In her vision, Sister Mary Catherine saw the earth itself crying out. The air was heavy, the waters polluted, and the land exhausted. It was not just a physical pain, but a spiritual one, as if creation itself was mourning the way it had been treated. Jesus showed her images of wildfires consuming forests, floods swallowing entire communities, and cities choked with smog. But then, just as she felt overwhelmed by the destruction, he revealed something else: hope. She saw people waking up to their responsibility as stewards of God's creation. In cities across America, new initiatives were being launched to clean the environment, reduce pollution, and restore natural habitats. Communities came together to plant trees, clean up rivers, and find sustainable ways to live. Farmers adopted eco-friendly methods, and businesses shifted towards ethical and sustainable production. Schools began teaching children about conservation and respect for nature, instilling in them a sense of duty to care for the planet. Jesus told her that the earth had been a gift, but it had been neglected for too long. Now, it was time to heal. If people chose to take action, the land would recover, but if they continued to ignore the warning signs, the consequences would grow worse. As Jesus guided her through the visions, Sister Mary Catherine was shown the increasing role of women in shaping the future. She saw mothers, teachers, and leaders playing crucial roles in healing America. Women were stepping forward in ways they never had before, bringing balance, wisdom, and compassion to the country. In homes, they were raising children to be kind and respectful, teaching them values that had been lost in the chaos of the modern world. In workplaces and communities, they were leading with a sense of purpose, ensuring that decisions were made with not just power, but with heart. Jesus showed her families becoming strong again, breaking free from the distractions that had weakened them. Parents were spending more time with their children, setting aside technology to truly connect. Marriages were being restored, not because they were perfect, but because people were learning to choose love over selfishness. Grandparents played a more active role in guiding younger generations, passing down wisdom that had once been forgotten. Sister Mary Catherine saw that America's healing would not come from government policies alone. It would come from the foundation of strong, loving families. It was within the walls of the home that true change would begin, and it was the role of both men and women to nurture that change. One of the most powerful moments in Sister Mary Catherine's vision was when she saw the youth of America. At first, she saw a generation struggling, distracted by social media, overwhelmed by the pressures of modern life, and disconnected from real human relationships. Many felt lost, searching for meaning in a world that often seemed chaotic and uncertain. But then, Jesus showed her something extraordinary. Among the confusion, there was a rising movement of young people who were waking up. They were asking deeper questions, rejecting the culture of division, and seeking truth, purpose, and faith. She saw groups of young men and women gathering in prayer, not because they were told to, but because they wanted to. They sought wisdom from their elders, eager to learn from the past rather than repeat its mistakes. They were using technology not to spread negativity, but to inspire and educate. Many chose to serve their communities, helping the poor, mentoring children, and standing up for those who had no voice. Jesus told her that this generation had been born for this time, that they had the strength to lead America into a new era. But it would be up to them to embrace that calling, to rise above distractions and step into their purpose. Sister Mary Catherine had witnessed many conflicts in her lifetime, but in her vision, Jesus showed her how deep the divisions in America had become. It was not just political, it was spiritual. People had turned against each other, convinced that their differences were more important than their shared humanity. Families had been torn apart by opposing beliefs, friendships had ended over arguments, and communities had fractured under the weight of distrust. But then, Jesus showed her something miraculous: healing. She saw people putting aside their anger and choosing to listen instead of argue. She saw churches opening their doors to people of all backgrounds, offering a space for unity rather than division. Faith was not about one group being right and another being wrong. It was about seeking truth, love, and understanding. In her vision, she saw people from different walks of life praying together, helping each other, and realizing that their faith was stronger than their differences. Jesus reminded her that no political leader, no government policy, and no human ideology could truly heal a nation. Only faith could. Only love could. And it was up to the people to choose that path. After showing her the future of America, Jesus gave Sister Mary Catherine a glimpse of something even greater, what awaited those who lived with love, faith, and kindness. For a brief moment, she was allowed to see heaven, and what she saw was beyond words. It was not just a place of golden streets and bright lights. It was a place where love was pure, where peace was complete, and where every soul was known and cherished. There was no pain, no fear, no loneliness, only joy. She saw people reunited with their loved ones, their faces glowing with happiness. She heard music unlike anything on earth, melodies that seemed to come from the very essence of creation. Jesus told her that this was the true home, the place where all were meant to be. But he also reminded her that life on earth was a journey, a test of the heart. People were given free will to choose love over hate, faith over fear, and kindness over selfishness. Those who lived with an open heart, who served others, and who sought truth would find their way here. Sister Mary Catherine felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She understood now, more than ever, why her mission mattered. She had been given this vision not just for herself, but for everyone who needed to hear it. Sister Mary Catherine's heart was filled with hope as she witnessed the healing and transformation Jesus showed her, but he also gave her a serious warning. In her vision, she saw what would happen if people grew complacent, if they allowed distractions to pull them away from faith, family, and kindness. She saw communities that had once come together slowly drifting apart again. The unity that had been built began to weaken because people assumed the work was done. Churches that had been filled with life started to empty as people became busy with their own concerns. She saw families once again becoming disconnected, spending more time on their devices than with each other. People became more focused on comfort and wealth than on serving others. Slowly, division crept back in. The same arguments that had once been set aside returned, but this time, they were more damaging because people had forgotten the lessons they had learned. Jesus showed her that the path to healing wasn't a one-time event. It was a lifelong commitment. If people stopped choosing love, if they stopped putting in the effort to build strong relationships and communities, the progress they had made would be lost. As Jesus continued to reveal his message, he reminded Sister Mary Catherine of the most powerful tool humanity had: prayer. She saw people praying not just in churches, but in their homes, in workplaces, in schools, and even on the streets. They weren't praying out of fear or desperation, but out of love and faith. She saw the incredible power that prayer had to transform lives. Families who had been on the verge of falling apart found healing. People struggling with addictions found the strength to overcome them. The lonely and the lost found a renewed sense of purpose. In her vision, she saw groups of people gathering to pray for their communities, their country, and the world. She saw children leading prayers in their schools, unafraid to share their faith. Jesus told her that prayer wasn't just about asking for help. It was about strengthening the connection between God and his people. It was through prayer that people found guidance, peace, and the ability to forgive. If America wanted to truly heal, it had to return to prayer, not as a last resort, but as a way of life. One of the most incredible parts of Sister Mary Catherine's vision was witnessing miracles happening before her eyes. She saw things that defied human logic. People being healed from illnesses doctors had declared untreatable, broken families being restored, and people who had lost all hope finding joy again. She saw small miracles too, ones that many might overlook. A single mother receiving unexpected help when she had nothing left. A homeless man being offered a job that would change his life. The lonely widow finding companionship in a way she never expected. Jesus explained that miracles weren't just dramatic events like parting the sea or raising the dead. They happened every day, often in quiet and simple ways. The problem was that people had stopped recognizing them. They had become so consumed with their struggles and worries that they missed the signs of God's presence all around them. He told her that if people opened their hearts and eyes, they would see miracles everywhere. And the more they acknowledged them, the more they would happen. The moment came when Sister Mary Catherine knew she had to go back. She didn't want to leave the presence of Jesus. She felt at home, at peace in a way she never had before. But he looked at her with infinite love and said, "Your time is not yet finished. You have a mission." Before she could respond, she felt herself being pulled away, as though she were being lifted back into her earthly body. The warmth of heaven faded, and suddenly, she was back in the hospital, gasping for air as doctors and nurses surrounded her. The medical staff were stunned. By all accounts, she should not have survived. She had been clinically dead for several minutes. Yet here she was, awake and alert. The first words she spoke were, "I saw Jesus." Tears filled her eyes as the memories of her experience flooded back. She knew she couldn't keep this to herself. She had been sent back for a reason, and she was determined to share everything she had seen and learned.